when we're when you're a person who's willing to live on the edge, and I don't want to say that in like an adrenaline junkie way, but maybe it kind of is. Um, you're willing to explore the edges continuously.
Mm.
And I think that provides it can provide a lot of chaos.
Mhm.
Um, but then it also provides a lot of truth, like God and goddess connection moments as well. And I think that's worth it because you feel, oh, I guess you begin to know that like the roller coaster that you're speaking about, it has a down period and there's gems in that. And that always unveils or unfolds to like the top of the ride, like
Yeah.
about
Yes, yes.
careen down and do a bunch of like loop-de-loops or whatever. Like,
Hi, I'm Ian.
And I'm Megan,
Welcome back or welcome to.
the Memory Millionaires Podcast.
We are survivors of government service,
Cancer
world travel.
and parenting. We're here to share stories and insights to help illuminate your path towards a happier, healthier lifestyle.
We got off of the easy street to get on this roller coaster.
mm,
And I say, how's it going? Oh, it's a roller coaster ride, because there's really some serious downs and some serious ups to what we've done to ourselves.
yes.
Imagine
But
something similar of an experience too. Well, probably not now. Like you had a roller coaster and now you'd like less of a roller coaster. My understanding. I don't know much about you. I know enough to know that there was some wild decisions that you were making, like how to become the fittest person in the world. How do
Yeah.
I? That's a wild like pursuit, and it must have had ups and downs.
oh, it was yeah, well, I think anything has ups and downs, but I think what you're speaking to is like when you're a person who's willing to live on the edge, and I don't want to say that in like an adrenaline junkie way, but maybe it kind of is. Um, you're willing to explore the edges continuously.
Mm.
And I think that provides a lot, it can provide a lot of chaos.
Mhm.
But then it also provides a lot of truth, like God and goddess connection moments as well. And I think that's worth it because you feel, oh, I guess you begin to know that like the roller coaster that you're speaking about, it has a down period and there's gems in that. And that always unveils or unfolds to like the top of the ride, like
Yeah.
about
Yes, yes.
careen down and do a bunch of like loop-de-loops or whatever. Like, so once you CrossFit taught me to be on, and I'm sure just like, your wife here who runs these death races or what, like it gives you this opportunity continually to meet this, to like be in the discomfort. And then I would say like the work physically, and then the work that I do now is like being in the discomfort of like in the unseen or like the edges of your psyche, and that always provides all these gems and jewels to bridge back into the reality that we're fabricating all the time for ourselves, consciously or not.
It's an education.
Mm-hmm.
Those runs are an educate to me. They're an educate. This is a place I've volunteered to go, a place I'd never been before, and one I doubted I could even reach. Well, shouldn't that educate me elsewhere? Like in parenting, daily, you are brought somewhere that you didn't want to go, you never thought you'd be, and it's your problem to solve. What you gonna do? Get mad? Oh, that didn't work. Plead with them? No, that didn't work. Deal. That's what you do. You deal.
Mm.
Yeah. So we call this the Memory Millionaires Podcast. And
Oh.
the
No deal.
Yeah. The idea behind Memory Millionaires is that we're creating wealth through experience rather than wealth through the accumulation of things and money. And what we've learned is that experience, it's not always the highs. It's not all about having the glamour and the perfect day and the best experience. A lot of that experience and the wealth that we're gaining from those experiences are coming from those lows, because that's where we build up to learn how to move forward and learn how to, be better versions of ourselves and be better versions of, I guess, humanity and like how we want to show up in the world. We're not learning that on our best days. We're learning that on our worst days. And so part of, being memory millionaires, what we have come to realize is that in our experience and the people that we talk to that are living this life that we consider like a wealth of experience is, there's a lot of unconventional living. Like people are living out at fringe is what the word we hear a lot, fringe, unconventional. People are living outside of what is societal norms. And you came into my world. I knew of you from your CrossFit days, but then I started to see this evolution that you were going through after all of the CrossFit phase passed, and this journey of you meeting your inner goddess. And I would like for you, Emily, to share as much as you're interested in sharing as just a little introduction to anyone listening. And then maybe we can go into discussing like what that journey was for you and what living an unconventional life means to you.
I love it. Yeah. When you talked about, spoke about this podcast and speaking or living an unconventional life, I was like, I actually never considered myself living an unconventional life, but like actually the deeper I go into the strange realms that I operate in, and then I resurface again and maybe talk to someone who's living more in, I don't want to call it the Matrix, but we'll call it the Matrix for now. I'm like, oh yeah, there's a huge juxtaposition here. And I'm starting to really embrace that and honor that more and more within myself, within my partnership. Within everything that we do. So it's what was seemingly impossible. I was just telling this to my man last night. Was a life that was seemingly impossible is becoming way more possible. And that's actually kind of scary because it's like, I didn't think, hi, little babe. Is that Gavin?
This is Gavin.
Gavin, hi, sweetie. Oh, you're so chunky and cute. So yeah, it's pretty wild. But for those who are listening and don't know my story, I grew up in Canada and I was always this outboard motor athlete. It was like a lot of intensity. I played collegiate basketball. I won a couple national championships up in Canada. And then I got into the CrossFit scene shortly after, worked my way up that to become, I think my best finish was like 8th fittest in the world in 2015. And I trained really hard in that sport for about, or like whatever pseudo sport that is, for about 5 years. And then I had a really unfortunate splitting away from CrossFit. I tested positive, 0.001 picograms per whatever of a peptide, I guess it would be described as now. And I had to go through a lot of lawyers and defending my innocence. I was in an unfortunate relationship that there wasn't a lot of respect or boundaries or anything that talked about. It was with a military man, and he was taking a substance and it was transferring to me. And we could get into the weeds of that, but it's like spiritually what that all meant, and yeah, how I give meaning to that now. But ultimately it was my responsibility, and CrossFit didn't believe me, and I was like rolled through the mud, like publicly, like, you're a cheater, you've always been a cheater, you're a disgrace to the sport, like all this, like articles, YouTube videos. It must have been 2018 or 17. 2017.
Yes.
This is the peak of CrossFit, isn't it? This is before the restructuring.
Yeah.
This is they're on prime time with the CrossFit Games. And this is a year that we're deep in the Kool-Aid too. Like we're talking about how we're going to open our own gym someday.
Oh yeah.
We love the format and we love the inclusivity, and most of the gyms we went to and participated in were like the golden CrossFit gyms that were hyper enabling. Some of them a little too much. Like they would injure people because they were so excited about it. But
right. I love that word, hyper enabling.
Well, yeah. Come on, you can do it. Like she's 70. Chill.
Yeah. Give the lady a break.
Everyone could do rope climbs. Maybe not. But so
you got
flamed on.
Flamed. Yeah.
Oh yeah, it was a scorched earth, kind of like everything I had worked really hard for, sponsorships. I had, when I began CrossFit, I was like, I want to do fitness and I want to eat food and I want to travel. And like, I was doing all of that and it was amazing, it was such a blessing. And then, I got in so deep into that, and I was overriding everything in my body to like continue that sport, including my feminine physiology. And and then once that happened, it was very clear that I was no longer to be a part of this cult anymore. And it was all of a sudden I got invited on all of these trips, like to Israel. Then a mentor of mine told me to go to India, and then from India I got invited. I went to Australia, and then I got invited to go to Peru. And that's when I was like, okay, well, I guess I'm supposed to do ayahuasca. So I like did my first ayahuasca journey, and then that opened up everything that I was supposed to integrate and work on as a human being moving forward, which landed me deep in this work of pelvic health and sexuality and women coming back to their bodies in a bigger way.
The trips came after the flaming on, the fall from CrossFit.
Like a week, like I got a call. They're like, "Hey, this group was like, hey, do you want to come to Israel for a trip?" I was like, "Okay." So like the universe opening doors, like say goodbye to everybody and just go, because I had to be with myself and come to terms with everything I think I had been running from. And CrossFit or fitness was a way for me to I guess discharge rage and not feel trauma.
You put it in too. Like you were more than hobbying, workouts. You were exploring boundaries, edges of your capabilities, of female capabilities. Like you were part of a team saying, how much could we do? How fast could we go? How much could we do in a weekend? And they said you were cheating at it. So you bounced off of that limit, but not genuinely. Like you weren't cheating. You weren't exploring with like an outside source. You were internally doing everything you could to be the fittest person on earth. And then they said, no, you can't do that anymore. And either now you had a choice. Am I capable of operating at my limits in any kind of limit? Is this me shutting down, or here comes an opportunity to go explore another limit? Go somewhere you've never been before. Physically. Israel. What happened?
Well, in Israel, you know, it was like 2 weeks fresh of just like still being lambasted by like CrossFit. And I was with this student group that wanted to promote Israel in a different light. So it was kind of a politically motivated trip. I don't really, but it was incredible. I had been to Israel before for basketball. And so I loved that I was returning there 10 years later when I was 28. And yeah, it was an incredible trip of the culture, the people, these young students who were so stoked about their country and wanted to show its beauty. And yeah, and then they're like, where do you want to go next? And they flew me into India, where I went and hung out at this ashram and basically deconstructed all of my Western conditioning for a time, and really had to come face to face with all of my feels, which I had really done before, being, you know, a cornbread Western Canada farm girl. Feelings.
And Huya fitness, like raw fitness, not fitness.
Yeah. What do you mean by that?
Like not fitness, raw capabilities instead of presence capabilities.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, beautiful. And then, yeah, visited my sister in Australia, and then I got invited on this like CrossFit trip to Peru.
What was that span of time?
3 months.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Wow.
It was wild. It was wild, but you know what? That's exactly how my heart had always wanted to live. I was like, I love this nomadism and travel and wild people in all the edges of our universe. So yeah, it was leaving CrossFit was like shedding a huge weight of trying to always be exceptional, so that I could just be myself. And it took me years to unwind like why I was always trying to be so damn exceptional. And now my core question has deeply changed, even though I've still come up against that battle. Megan and I have talked about it, you know, of like wanting now it's changed to like how I can, not only how can I support, but how can I be the most like erotically being.
Yeah.
He was supposed to be napping through the whole thing. We even kept him tired.
Oh, that's okay.
He wanted to meet Emily.
Yeah, he wanted to hang out. Hi, buddy.
Yeah, so the how I came to working with you was just I was seeing this journey that you were on, and then suddenly you were presenting this, you know, this course that you were doing, the Hammer of the Goddess. And what initially drew me to that is that like one of our favorite bands is Led Zeppelin. And I was like, oh, Hammer of the Gods, but goddess. And then the more I looked into it, the things that Emily are saying are all the things that I feel that are missing in me. Is I don't have a connection to my femininity. I am very in my masculine, performing to, you know, an athletic ability, but also at the detriment of honoring my body and, you know, the feminine within me. And I just knew like, oh, if Emily went from the space of being such a high level in her athleticism to now like fully embracing the feminine and the goddess within, maybe this is the right person to help me figure out where's my goddess. Right. And that journey has been harder than any 100-mile race I've done. And we've worked together, you know, multiple different ways. And it's just like every time I feel like I have something figured out, there's another layer and there's more to figure out and there's deeper to go. And when I talk to other women about this work, that it seems very like the way they reflected back to me is that like, oh, I couldn't do that, or like, oh, that's not right for me. And
Similar to running. I couldn't possibly do that.
Yeah.
Actually, we are so similar. You could do it if you just changed your habits.
yeah, and that like what I try to convey to the women that are saying this to me is this is who you are, but we've learned to suppress who we really are to the point where being expressed in our femininity and in our sexuality is considered unconventional. Right? We've swung so far in this wave of being equal and women can do anything that it's gone too far, and we're all performing at this level that's counter to, you know, our inner essence. And I'm still every day fighting that conditioning of believing I need to behave in a certain way, mother in a certain way, you know, show up in my relationship a certain way. And, you know, the idea that that is considered what you're doing and what you're teaching other people and how they come into their bodies is considered fringe is just, you know, we've made this cycle, and now like, how do we go back to now being in your femininity and sexuality and the pure love of being a woman? How do we bring that back to that's normal?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think too, now we're seeing a huge almost subversion or inversion of these like feminine and masculine principles, which are just primordial concepts of these two different primordial like principal energies that run through every human being. And we're seeing like, well, there's always going to be subversions in the field, but there's, you know, what a question my teacher posed me is like, why is the feminine abandoning the feminine? And we're seeing that more and more as women come home to their bodies, because it's an undeniable truth. Just like nature, you cannot fight nature. We can try to conquer it, and man has done a beautiful job of like conquering some aspects of it, and a really ugly job as well. But for women, we have to surrender to our nature. It's like there's literally no fighting it, unless you want to have a diseased, tension-filled life, which the medical system is kind of continually cyclically rolling over. Like, oh, okay, like pharmaceuticals and surgery. But I think as women come home to their nature, we're expanding the menu of what's possible in the feminine form and what really lives there, and the deep endogenous journey that a woman has to go on, whereas a man has to go on this exogenous journey of climbing to the top of the mountain. Well, the woman's already the mountain, and she's already up there, and she has to do the big work, I guess, from like a Jungian perspective, the deep unseen psychic work of the collective, because we're conduits to the spirit world. Like Megan's birthed 3 babies and like I'm sure one has been so and so I mean, like, you witness that power, and I just feel like there's no going back once you know it.
That just occurred to me that you women are the doorway to consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
Holy crap. I geek out over consciousness. I love any kind of conversation or philosophy that explores the direction of consciousness, like how you can take a drug, I can take a drug, you can take a drug right now and affect our consciousness. But actually, there's a witness that is consistent through any of those experiences, documenting things, even in a near-death experience, that you are dead. Something is documenting what actually happened when you come back. There's a consistence of, there's a capital C consciousness that comes from her and is in him, enabled by him. Like he can go unconscious, I can go unconscious, you can go unconscious, but you create the thing that enables consciousness.
Oh, wow.
process that as the doorway to it. Like, all right, I built the door. Now it's up to him to go through it.
Yeah. That is also, it's reflected in a lot of like our mythological lore. You know, it's the woman is that pathway to God. And so huge responsibility in that. And there's a huge power in that. And it's gnarly. Like as I get closer to this birth death portal, I realize the psychedelic intensity of it. Just, you don't even need to take a drug. It's as psychedelic as it gets. And if I was just reflecting this morning, if I didn't have the resources, if I didn't have the guides, if I didn't understand like my own embodiment and like the role of emotions, this would be a terrifying experience.
Often.
You know, it would be overwhelming, and it would be, I would want an external source to come. And so I completely have compassion for people who are in that position. However, I really think that we are on this precipice as the feminine just gains all this electric speed, you know, Shakti's really moving. There's such a responsibility in owning your feminine power and wield its integrity.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And it's
Oh,
it's not an easy path to take. It's so counter to, at least for me, it was so counter to everything I've learned and the examples I've been given of how I should live as a female my entire life, that it was a really big leap to work with you and then to decide like, well, I need to take this further. And I still feel there's just more and more that I need to work through to get to the point where I know it's never ending, but I know that there's another layer of consciousness in finding that divinity within me. And I've found the divinity within me in my runs, in my experiences giving birth, but I know that there's more there.
He's talking about him giving birth. He was looking at her and just smiling so big.
oh,
Like, thank you, Mama.
yeah. And well, you know, Megan, you bring up a really interesting point, because I do work with a lot of women who are in the athletics, and they're like they want to explore this like feminine principle. And I think that what I noticed a lot is it's kind of twofold. One is that the athletic woman has this beautiful tenacity, like we were talking about before, to sit in discomfort. Absolutely, like she's been channeling her sexual energy just in a very specific way. She just maybe wasn't conscious. Difference between goal and desire. And I think that athletic women are often really goal oriented. Like you said, I need to get to that point. And really, well, the point is, like you said, within. It's this, you're getting closer to this desire, but your desire is actually endless, like the sun shining. It's just continually shining. And so that's where I think a lot of sometimes it's like that shifting of that consciousness, the athlete consciousness to like the feminine consciousness, is that, well, I'm continually getting closer and feeling my desire fulfilled. And that's an incredible place to live, because I think that's the place where you're now living an unconventional life. Because you're continually connecting back to the desire. What is the desire? How does that run through my body? What does that feel like? But most women don't want to go there, yes, because it's cloaked in a pain body. And yeah, they'd rather just not ever explore that. So, which is surprising. But also I understand, like, everyone on their own time and everyone in their own way. But yeah, feminine awakenings aren't all roses and orgasms.
Yeah. And I don't know if this is typical of athletic women that you work with, but I'm assuming, yes, it is that like, okay, I'm going to do this, like our 8 weeks that we work together. Okay, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to, like, it's almost like I was trying to force it like, okay, I'm going to do this 8 weeks with Emily, and then I'm going to have my shit together, and I'm going to find my feminine essence, and I'm going to feel great, and I'm going to be like the sexualized like goddess. And it was rough that 8 weeks, and realizing like, oh, I'm nowhere near like, I'm trying to force things. And forcing is still in that consciousness of in that masculine of, this is the result, this is the outcome I want. And that the feminine journey is not about what you want. It's about going with the flow, like, there is an element of control still, but you also have to release that control and like go through the journey and be open to like what is coming through to you, how do your desires change, and that I really had to work on my mindset of there's no endpoint to this. This is not something this is where I stop, and I've accomplished this, and I am the divine feminine, and we're done. It really took a lot of changing my mindset of, oh, holy shit, this is going to be a lifelong process, and a lot of it's going to be hard, but
infinitely more harmonious, because you're learning to play your instrument exquisitely and how that looks. And then, oh, wow. And, we talk about endpoints, and you talk about like outcomes. That actually isn't the like masculine principle. That is patriarchy for ultimately, which is where most of us, this is why it's hard to get out of that huge collective current. It's like a massive river, because most of us, the way we're conditioned is that we operate from a place of not wanting to feel fear. So we try to control and manage outcomes. And that is the distorted masculine. So we end up forcing things. We end up grinding. We end up trying to do everything. We try to almost manipulate, coerce, like make sure everything is good so we get ours, and so we win. Because that when we win, that means I'm doing good at life, right? Which is where we get kind of almost fetishized materialism and things in the world. And so I would say that's like the true divine masculine is one that is striving for peace and is just solid and connected, earthed in himself, and earthed not only in himself, but in his relationship with the divine, whatever that is, the universe source. And then the feminine's the Shakti. She gets to dance around and, like you said, flow and move. And she has huge emotional depths. She's like a, stormy ocean, and then she's a glassy ocean. And it's like really embracing that, those two poles, which we have internally as well as externally and with our partner, and then cosmically. That is a constant refinement. And you will bump up against all this old conditioning you have to dismantle and realize like, oh yeah, that's all story. But the freedom lies within. And I think that's probably what you're speaking to when you're saying it's hard, because all roads lead back to you. Yes. It's like nobody else is going to do it.
No one else has an answer. There's no one else I can look to. I can seek guidance and counsel like I've done with you and other mentors I have. But essentially all the work comes back to me, and it always is going to come back to me. And that on one hand is great, because I know that I have some control over this, but also that's really hard.
Yeah.
I have to do this on my own.
Yeah, it's like learning to hold yourself, to remother and refather yourself. And that is a big, big process for sure. In fact, that I should be working with women for like 6 months to a year, because it can be really intense. But think about that on a physical level, like, if all roads lead back to me, what does this illness or dis-ease mean in my body? If all roads lead back to me, what does my emotional patterns mean? If all roads lead back to me, why, if my menstrual cycle is a mess, okay, there's something that I can like go within to figure out. If all roads lead back to me, how do I want to co-create my reality? And that's where it gets like then really exciting. We become these gods and goddesses embodied within this beautiful realm where we have infinite choice, but also no control. So it's like this incredible dichotomy or duality of holding paradox in the body and being able to play with that.
Yeah. And our society has gotten so good about externalizing, like outsourcing the solutions to everything that happens. If, we need to relearn how to come back to where is this in me?
Intuition.
My intuition telling me, rather than seeking validation from wherever you reach, a doctor, social media, the news, a coach. Yeah, it always comes back to you, but it's just far too easy to externalize that in our society. And
that's why we have so much knowledge, which is incredibly powerful, but not a ton of embodied wisdom.
Yeah. Yeah. And when you, going back a couple minutes, you spoke to, the confusion between the masculine and the patriarchy. And as I consider that, I think, wow, it must be even harder for men because it's so conditioned of, we confuse what is patriarchy for being masculine, but the masculine is actually, more divine and more, grounded and not what a lot of people consider masculine. We're all thinking of patriarchy. We're thinking of patriarchy and not actually masculinity.
Yeah, I so agree with that. And I'm really passionate about that because I often work with women who, I would say even in my CrossFit days, I did hold an anger and a resentment towards men. And that is like kind of part of the second wave feminism that we are all brought up in, especially with television. The dad's always like this bumbling idiot and he's not wise. And the woman is always like the one that is. And so they've grown up in this system too. And so many of the feminists, who identify as feminists or whatever you want to call it, that's where they get stuck. They get stuck in the rage. But rage is secondary. The feminine, actually, the depth of it is the grief, like being able to metabolize that grief so that you can then invite that king into his potentiation. And that's why a woman is so powerful when she connects to the desire, which is after the rage, after the grief, then there's desire. And men have been brought up in this system too. And they have been taught through porn, through like circumcision, and through conquest, that's the only way for them to attain power, because they can't birth, like Ian said, they can't birth consciousness. Like, what's their purpose? What is their purpose as a man? So it's like, that's where their journey, their spiritual journey is so important, because it can be totally led astray into toxicity, just like the woman can be led astray into toxicity. And when I say toxicity, I'm not saying toxic masculine or feminine. I'm saying it's an ego or personality that we're in the grips of, rather than being full-hearted human. And so that growing up from adolescence into actual maturation, which is like what I see in you two, is like these two beautiful poles dancing together and raising radical children and doing radical things in this world. Is like, that is what is possible. And that's what is possible when there's a consciousness around lovemaking. And when we start to unwind all these parts of ourselves that are habituated or on autopilot or default, when we just start to get aware of that and see that, it's like, oh God, this is way cooler than I thought. And I don't have to be in that massive stream of the collective consciousness playing the same story. And we're going to go over here into a different stream where there's all maybe some other weird stream people doing stream things, So yeah, that is the power of working with your sexuality at its base level.
We talked about this I think it was just the previous podcast about what's the purpose of coming onto something like this, talking about being on the fringe to people who are still in the matrix. And I think it's to say, look, it's okay out here. I'm not drowning. I'm not a leper. I'm not, impossible to get along with. I'm not failing my children, as you might think, as people caution themselves before they do something on the fringe. You can try. There's so many safety nets. So many, at least if you can recognize you have them, it should influence you to go rather than to stay in the matrix.
Yeah. Well, and I think this is what's cool. Like I was reading, the word matrix is like the Latin origin is matri, and that is like mother. And so like when we think of matrix, it's actually like a big womb, we are in a big womb of creation. And so like, yeah, it's interesting we're not necessarily exiting the matrix. We're going into ourselves to repopulate or reform the matrix in a way that is a lot more life-giving and life-nurturing.
That's a much better perspective of the use of the word matrix. Like, I want to get out of the matrix. No, I want to change it.
I want to change it. And it's when people start questioning and then start really getting into what is my calling to the most beauty. And it's not necessarily like grinding and like getting to some end point, like you're saying, Megan. But it's like, what's the most beauty I can do today? Maybe it is just raising my kids and painting. Maybe it is going out there and doing something for service. Maybe it is connecting all these cool people together and saying like, hey, yeah, it's not so bad out here. But also I think sometimes when we get into like these like spiritual realms, there is a lot of othering, and it's like, oh, the other is bad, or like the other is asleep. And yes, there's some badness and there's some asleepness, but one of my teachers told me recently, especially because like I work with a lot of women who have a lot of iatrogenic or medical trauma, from like the gynecology world or the obstetrical world or the patriarchy in general. And so it can be really easy to get like mad, and I have to let myself get mad because there's aspects of that. But my teacher said it's really important as we like say move into different levels of this matrix that you include and transcend the previous level. And because if you curse it, you're going to fall straight back down. And I was like, oh man, that's so powerful, because how can I include people that are like maybe curious, but then maybe scared about your choices as you become more sovereign? How can I include them and soften and have like compassion for them? And I think that is where we release the need to like other and really try to bring people up and over whatever barriers they have, psychological or psychic barriers they have to living a wholehearted life.
And like we're saying, that's how it changes.
Yes.
That's including them, not saying, oh, sheeple are over there.
Yeah.
That's your neighbor. Like, you're not going to help them. You're just going to say, I'm sailing off in my ship. Good luck. Like, no, spread the good word of it's okay. It's okay to go inside. It's okay to yell, rage at what you wish was different, and then come back to, all right, now what do I do with that?
Yeah.
What do we do with that?
Yeah. Absolutely.
So we like to have a call to action for people that listen to our podcast. So, I mean, you've said so many things that I could consider a call to action. But I wanted to just ask you what, like someone listening to this, what would your call to action be for?
Start doing your life on purpose, not out of habituation, and just start noticing where in your life there's habituation and where there's purpose, because where there's purpose, there's freedom. And that is why, I'll circle back again, that I work in the realms of sexuality, because when we unwind the automations there, that has a cascading or rippling or expanding capacity in the rest of your life. And you begin, oh, am I doing purpose or is this habit? What am I trying to not feel here? Oh, I'm going to scroll on Instagram on purpose and I'm going to get all those dopamine hits. Okay, cool. Like, that's where the call to action, because if you can start there, you can do anything. And when humans figure out that their sexuality and their expression of their sexuality has been cloaked for thousands of years in shame and guilt, and they can come home to it in a really powerful way, that's when, and we start having really soul level conscious lovemaking, man, that's going to heal the world.
Yeah,
Purposeful.
purposeful. I love that.
Purposeful
That's like
choices.
really in alignment with where I feel like I am in my life and our journey right now. So just a good reminder. Purpose.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and it's such a pleasure, like, watching you unfold, Megan, like, and seeing what you're conveying, and like just how embodied you've become from like the first time. It's such a gift, and a blessing to watch that.
Yeah, and it's been I appreciate so much the journey that you've led me on, of like what I thought it would be to go on this journey, and then like how comfortable you've made me, but also uncomfortable in facing some of the things that I needed to, I guess, the beliefs and ideas about myself that I held within.
Yeah.
Because it's all what is internal. And that's been my biggest lesson, is everything I need to work on is already inside me.
Totally. Yeah. And all these unexamined beliefs that not only like the woman has about her body, but men too, like, we just need to examine them. It doesn't mean that like live in the fringes. You just examining them. Like,
Yeah.
why? So yeah, it's I think that is being fringe, is just starting to examine your own big instilled embodied beliefs.
See, yeah, this comes back to something that's becoming popular, and I'm glad it is. What is healthy and natural is no longer normal.
Yeah.
So we're by doing something that has been timeless, of going into ritual, going into initiation, going into yourself, your consciousness, and exploring there, has been made illegal, has been frowned upon, called fringe, called woo, when it is timelessly true. It's in everything. Every civilization, every religious practice is based on internalized or seeking an inner knowing.
It's like, that's birth. It's
What do you know?
so, I mean, it starts from the moment we arrive here on Earth. So.
You know, you haven't been taught not to know.
Yeah. I'm curious how that, knowing what you guys know and knowing how, like, just the journey you've been on, how has that shifted your parenting outlook, or how you?
I'm noticing how much I put my ego onto things, onto them, onto the house, onto our relationship as I'm taught to do that. I was taught to be the system of checks and balances, be the patriarch of the family, unless there's a matriarch. And that's what I've experienced in my family. There wasn't a unit of love guiding a family. It was either a matriarch or a patriarch.
Mm.
And in your work and in our relationship, we've noticed her tendency to recede, to all right, we lived in an RV and we towed a car behind it. We went down a wrong way street. The car's battery was dead and we couldn't back up to turn around. So this was a rough situation. And she went into freeze and I went into fight. And we learned a lot about our positions inside the relationship. And afterwards, our cooperation figured that situation out, among others, since then. But that was a like on the fringe, backed into a corner. What happened? We went into those learned behaviors of submit, dominate. When what worked was submit to the situation.
Submitting to the situation and then leaning on each individual's strength rather than saying, well, you're the strength or I'm the strength. It's, I think our biggest lesson in this journey of parenting is that I'm so tired.
Here it is. Here it is happening.
Is
Like-
that, you know, we're a unit, but like all of humanity is responsible for the care of everyone else in humanity, right? Yes, we have our individual families and we have to take care of our children, but it's just as important that we care for our neighbor or the guy downtown that's obviously on drugs or, you know, whatever situation. I try to consider each person now as if that was my baby. Okay. And also that gives me a lot more compassion for other people. But also remembering, again, going back to the inner child, that I am that baby. I am that one who needs the unconditional love and care, and just to not be so hard on myself and not be so hard on my spouse. Yeah, it's seeing everyone now as that person is my child has just completely changed my view of the world. Like,
You're the ultimate mother. You really are.
yeah, and it gets really emotional sometimes because you realize I realize I don't have the power to help everyone and be what I am to my own children, to everyone. But if I can just do a little bit better in my interactions with other people, just try to be better, right? Like you said, what beauty can I bring into the world today? Well, if I can just treat one person a little bit better than old Megan might have, like, okay, it's eventually going to have ripple effects. And it does. I already see it happen. So it's my biggest takeaway of parenting is just learning to love people better.
Oh, love that.
Mine's been, they don't need you, but they have you. So what are you? Are you hard to deal with? Are you enabling? Are you disabling? Are you complementary? Are you contradictory?
With your kids.
Yeah.
And her. She educates me in capability daily. Like I am the student in our relationship. I've entered into ultra racing after I saw her capable of doing it. I entered into CrossFit after I saw her capable of doing it.
Wow.
Yeah, I am educated often by her while learning not to be that patriarch. So there's that conflict of like that inner patriarch in me is like, no, you got to be the one to figure it out. Yeah, but she did. So submit. Just chill out. She figured it out. Go that way. You don't need to put your stamp of. You don't need to put your ego onto it. The kids do. There was a day I was in a meditation consideration. I wasn't meditating. I was inside someone else's, narration. And it had nothing to do with what came to me, which was, what if you didn't say anything? It was just that question came to me. What if you didn't say anything? And for the rest of that evening, I did as little. He's done.
Yeah.
We did as little I did as little speaking as I could. And I watched things go just fine.
Wow.
They were just fine. They went better. So that's my position inside all of this education is the world doesn't need you, it gets you. So what does it get?
Wow.
What does it get? What are you giving?
I love that. That's quite profound.
It's rough.
Well, you two are doing so amazing and such a beautiful example of what's possible. And it makes me stoked to know that there's humans up on the North Pacific coast, Pacific West, I guess, just north of me, just living an alternate lifestyle with a bunch of kids. It's cool.
Works
good.
We are off on the roller coaster ride.
Yeah. So what's next for you?
Downsizing into a travel trailer so that we can be hypermobile.
That's awesome.
We'll see. Maybe.
Yeah. Try it out at least. Well, that's the thing, right? I think you gotta experiment. You have to experiment.
That old Chinese story where the horse runs away but comes back with some stallions. The son is trying to ride it and breaks his leg, and the conscription comes and he can't conscript the son because he's got a broken leg. And every time the father is approached by a neighbor, he says, maybe it's bad. Maybe it's good. Maybe it's bad. Maybe it's good. Maybe. Trying to be there. Maybe. Forth boldly. See what happens.
See what happens. You got to try.
Thank you for your perspective. Very much.
Yeah, it's so wonderful getting to know you a little bit more, Ian, like, and what you're about. And yeah, you guys are just dropping truth mics all over this place.
Truth mics.
Yeah, it's really great.
If one person has a positive takeaway from all of our conversations, we've done something right. So.
Totally. I think it's needed. Absolutely. It's needed in these very strange times.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for your time. It's
Thank you.
You've been a light in the past, year and a half that I've known you. So
oh gosh.
Thank you to more Emily in my future.
Yeah, hell yeah. I would love, I know we're gonna to each other or do something. Yeah.
Really excited for you to be a mom because it's the hardest and best thing I've ever done. So
yeah. Well, I have no choice now. It's like I'm surrendering to my nature.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Here.
All right.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. Thank you for trusting me and creating the. Let's be in touch.
Yeah.
For sure.
Take care.
Wait. Don't go. If you found value in this episode, please subscribe and share via review or post how this episode complemented your life.
Thank you for listening. Connect with us on Instagram or Facebook at Memory Millionaires. Be well.